Yeah, we're muted.
Yeah, we,
All right, now I hear you. Okay.
yes, yes,
Hamburger
we're
and
muted
Ron
because we are live
Yeah,
and we're waiting
Larry's-
for one more person. Oh, and here he
And
is.
here's Mike.
That'll do it. Hi, Mike.
All right, we have a quorum.
Wait,
All right. We good? All right, well, we're going to bring the Finance Committee meeting to order. Thank you for participating. We have myself, Glenn, and Mike Stershik making the quorum, right?
We have Glenn Reben on the,
Yeah.
okay. Happy birthday, Glenn.
happy birthday, Glenn.
All together now. Happy birthday, Glenn.
Thank you very much.
Not-
Just so you guys know, today I end the third quarter. Tomorrow I start the fourth quarter, 76 to 100.
Wow.
Nice.
I'm 75 today.
Gotcha.
Go, good.
Gentani.
We won't sing to you,
If I,
Glenn.
No,
if I make it through the
Don't think
fourth
so.
quarter, then I'll go overtime.
Please don't.
That'll be going over.
all right. Is there any public comment?
We do not, sir.
No public comment. Then we're going to go through the approving the minutes from last month, if everybody read them.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, aye, they're approved. And then the financial statements, I'm going to turn it over to Todd. Not bad.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Go through the February financials. Always start off with the traffic. We had a nice even number of 53,000 for the month of February. Obviously, much better than last year. If you remember last year in February, we were really struggling. That was probably our worst quarter that we've had in several decades. So obviously better than last year. And, you know, we've been trending in that kind of between 17 and 18 early on. Not quite at the 2018 level, but obviously better than 2017. Just we put this together just to kind of show kind of the traffic. This is the month-over-month traffic. You can see that 53,000 there to your left there, that big blue, where we stand kind of since 2017. You can see what happened in that green line, obviously in 2020 when we were skyrocketing after February, and then kaboom. And then you see off to your right there, that year-to-date traffic and where it ranks from 2017. This is like the fourth best out of 6 years for January and February. We're using the benchmarking here. This is versus all U.S. airports. You can see us there toward the middle there, toward that little black line. You know, our throughput is down. We're not doing as well as other airports as far as the average airports, all airports in the USA as far as traffic, but the seats are there. So we're down 9.7. The rest of all other airports in the U.S. are down, or actually up about 3%.
In terms of the airports that are up, what's their situation versus what ours is?
You'll get a better feel for that when you see our peer airports. A lot of it is just, you know, the makeup of some of our business. But you can see, like if you go down to the next one, you can see where we stand. We're actually top amongst our peers.
Okay.
Kind of same folks in our bracket, but you know, if you compare us to all the airports in the USA, and again, some of them are knocking it out of the park, but obviously compared to our peers, and these are the same airports that we use in our benchmarking survey every year. AVP is that that's Scranton, so you can see Scranton down there at AVP. I think MDP is Harrisburg, right? No, ISP, right? MDT, I always get that confused. MDP, you can see that one is Harrisburg, so they're down 21%. So that's kind of comparable to us. So, and their seats are down as well. And you can see what's happening, obviously, in Scranton down there in the 40-plus range.
Tom, can you run through which LBE, TTN, et cetera, so we all have a basis?
You asked me that, I have my sheet.
No, that's why I asked Tom.
No, I actually have my cheat sheet, I actually do have a cheat sheet. I knew you were going to ask me that, so.
I'm sure Tom knows every one of them.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't.
I've memorized it. I think I can tell you every one of them. I know I could.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's Latrobe, Trenton, Islip, White Plains, Harrisburg, Charleston, West Virginia, Charlottesville, Atlantic City, Wilkes-Barre, and Newport.
That's pretty good, actually.
The old pilot in me, Todd.
Wow, great, wow, pretty impressive there.
Did you check? Am I right?
I
I know I'm right. Yeah, you can check if you want.
Yeah, no, it looks like you're right there. Oh, wow.
Say it authoritatively.
Now you gotta say I'm backwards. All right, but again, you can see, you know, versus, and this is through March 12th, so this is kind of January through March 12th, just to kind of get a feel for what's going on for us versus other airports and on our peers. February is, you know, this is just for the month of February. This is also a month that we got CARES. You remember last month we did not receive any CARES funding. So, again, we were positive without CARES, 83,000 with CARES, pretty significant, 1.1. Obviously collected over $1 million in CARES. Overall expenses are down. You see some of our revenue items are up. But the one thing I want to point out about our expenses being down, some of that is head count. But a lot of it, if you think about our snow expenses, which are pretty significant, you know, our average snow for since 2018 for the January and February has been about 221,000 for the first 2 months. We're at 247. So the fact that the overall expenses are down and we spent more than that average. Obviously, last year we got walloped in February where we spent $315,000 just in February. So, and we always talk about that $300,000 that we have set aside for snow. The big portion of that is spent in January and February. So if you remember how bad last year was, just to kind of take us down memory lane, that's part of the reason we start out with some low projections because our traffic is usually historically low. It starts out low during the winter months. And then we're also getting hit with snow. So it's kind of a double whammy. Last year we really got hit hard. Traffic was at a really anemic level and we got walloped really bad with snow. Probably compared to 2020 where we had hardly any snow, we got walloped in a big way in 2021.
Did we have significant other flight cancellations besides weather?
As part of the February, there were some. I don't know, I would characterize it as significant, but mostly, you know, weather a factor, but also in some cases flight crew factors.
So this is year to date, just kind of coupling January and February together. Remember last month we had 300K without CARES, so obviously it's 383K January and February. Positive sign for us. Again, we thought we would start the year off not quite this good. So the fact that we've got a nice little cushion gives us some leeway as we go throughout the rest of the year because we always have some unexpected stuff that kind of hits us. Talk to our top profit centers. Aviation services is leading the charge early in the year, followed by parking. Our parking revenue is down versus our budget, mainly because of traffic being down. We thought traffic would be at a higher level, January, February, not quite at that level yet. But then you kind of see the other areas that kind of pick up the slack that make up that 1.4. Obviously, the biggest number on here is the CARES. So you talk about net income, you know, 1.4, but $1 million of that is coming from the CARES.
How much CARES money do we have left to collect?
I think we've got, in our budget for this year, I think there's another 2.5, something like that, 2.5 left this year, CARES and Sarissa money. Then we'll be done with that, and then that'll be the end of our CARES and Sarissa money. This is kind of breaking out our budget variances. Obviously, we talked about the salary and wages, which is basically a function of where we were as far as FTEs versus budget. And I always talk about our budget of integrity, but we had the money in there from day one. We didn't play any games. We didn't say, all right, well, we're going to get these folks later. We could find the folks. We would have had them in January 1st. Obviously, we're not there yet, but that should make us feel good that when we can get them, we can get them. So that's making up most of that. That's about 16% is just in that head count. And it's really FTEs is really the number that's more important than actually head count. Because just to give you an idea, we have about 250 some employees, and about 135 or so are full-time. We got a pretty good mix of part-time folks.
Hiring's starting to get any better?
A little bit.
A little bit.
We're hearing that from a number of people.
It is starting to get better,
Yeah.
and I'll have some information to talk about that in a little bit. Ground handling, aviation services, you kind of have to take 2 and 3 together and then minus out 5. Because, we got more revenue for de-icing and fueling, but obviously the cost of fuel and the cost of de-icing went up. So, but the net is obviously positive, so something we feel good about. So those 5 things make up pretty much a significant amount of that $1 million variance. And this is the FTE count that we talk about. So we did it for January and February. We had in our original budget about 226 FTEs. For January, we had 191. February, we had 189. I think we're up since the last time we discussed, last meeting, we're up 9, I think, just in head count. But just to give you an idea, because Frank always asks me this question, year to date, just to kind of tell you what's going on, we had 5 full-time terminations, 6 part-time terminations, and 1 seasonal termination, total of 12 terminations. We added 5 full-time, 8 part-time, so we had a net 1 just over the last year. So again, for us, and some of those folks were in there were less than 90 days. So we brought them in and they just didn't make it. So again, anytime you got a positive in this environment, that's a good sign. And like I said, since the last time we had our meeting, we're up about 9 in total body count. And one of our new folks is over there. Shane is our new assistant accounting manager. He can wave. He likes all these little pretty charts, so he has his early contribution. So you can thank Shane for that. And we appreciate that. Thank you, Shane. And this is our cash flow we talk about. And the biggest thing on our cash flow is usually going to be the timing of some of our grants. And one of the big things you see on number 13 was the conductor funding. This was the first money that we got out of that fixed pot. And just trying to work through the coordination of that. We thought we were going to get it in February for a while, in March, but we ended up actually getting it in March. So that's why that's kind of pretty much an exact number. Same thing with the lease reimbursements. We talked about some of our lease lines and coordinating some of that. So that's in there as well. So those 2 lines there. And line 11, I want to point out too. Line 11 there, which is 1.2. We moved that number up prior to getting our preliminary settlement, just because our final number, so we gave you our financials for last year, was about 5.6 net income. Our final net income was over 6.2. And so about a $600,000+ variance. The biggest variance was on there was the vacation accruals, because we paid them out. That was about $100,000. The other big portion of that was the pension, which, if you ask me now, it's all gone. There was a $500,000 surplus last year because we were ahead of kind of that 7.5 number. It's all going now, so we would do it now. But that just tells you the volatility of that defined pension plan. When we have a good year, it's going to affect our financials positively. And when we have a bad year, it's going to really hit us hard. So, and this year, looking so far, not so good. So, again, and I think I mentioned that in my stuff here, I think we're down to February about 5.8. I wrote that down, 5 point. On our pension plans through February, we are down 5.8 on both plans, because they're pretty comparable, the union and a non-union plan, same mix of benefits, down 5.8. Last year, we made 13.3. So we basically, so our number that we need is 7.5. So we've already given back that 7.5 from last year. So now we need 8.3% between March and December to kind of have 7.5 for both years. You know, so this tells you that volatility.
Period.
I
Any
didn't,
chance you can?
what was that, Matt? Oh, is he talking to me or is he just?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Sorry, I was supposed to hit mute. Sorry, Todd.
That's okay. But again, that just tells you how volatile that is and how that can really hit our financials. But that number there, that settlement number, you know, the reason that number, so our most recent estimate is somewhere between 500 and 600, our preliminary number that we got literally right after we did this. So that's a lot better than we had in there. And the main reason for that is that some of the changes what we did, we changed our methodology, remember that? To kind of get everybody on the same playing field. That was a big part of it. And again, the way we spent our CARES money. That's a huge part of it. Had we not done that, we would have been giving them back a lot more than the 1.2. So again, what we want to do is, obviously, we're partners with the airlines. We want to be good partners with them, but at the same token, we want to take care of our folks first. And the way we're doing our business with our methodology is giving us some flexibility to do that. Not other airports cannot do that. A lot of other airports are actually just basically giving a lot of their CARES money to the airline. So they're getting it directly from the government, and then they're getting it from the airports the way their methodology is set up. So, and again, the two items that change the most here usually are going to be, like I said, the grants, and you know, a day or two difference. Sometimes we get these grants literally at the last day of the month or the first day of the month, and that can make a huge difference in the cash flow. Not long term, but obviously month to month it can change. And you can see down there, 225. I just do it for 6 months here, and then I'll show you in another chart. We're still at our $59,000 per day. And this is just showing that black line there is our 60-day kind of level that we've said we want to stay above at all times. And obviously, we're not concerned about that at this point for the foreseeable future. Any questions? I know I tend to ramble a little bit, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page. Everybody good?
Somewhat related question, how are our pension funds holding up?
I think I mentioned that earlier. They're down 5.8.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I missed
Yeah,
that.
that's what I was saying earlier.
Okay.
Last year, because you gotta remember, we were overfunded. We were overfunded at the end of 2020. And then we had 13.3.
Yep.
And then we had the 5.8. Now, one of the things you gotta remember that we did, I think it kind of shows the responsibility of our board and our staff together. Remember what we did when we did on our MMO last year? We actually said, we're not gonna lower that number. We could have actually put in a lower number. And we said, we're gonna put in a higher number. So that's gonna give us some cushion to protect ourselves, obviously, because the market's taking a hit. So, you know, if you take it together, that's why I said from March until December, we need about 8.3 to kind of have 7.5 for 2021 and 2022. So, and obviously, March hasn't started out too well either. So, again, you know, that's part of the reason that we're monitoring these things, because we're in a position now, and we did this a few years ago, where we put extra money in the pension plan, and that's really paid dividends for us. But there's probably going to come a point where we won't have that ability to do that. So that's something we continue to monitor, where it's like we want to be good stewards of the pension, but mindful that we got to run our business as well. Any other questions?
Okay, then, motion to accept the financial statements for presentation to the board. We got Mike. We'll give Glenn the second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Todd.
there was no new business.
Oh, thank you. Is there any new business? And then a call for adjournment.
Move.
Thank you. Adjourn.
So moved.
Thanks. Ready for the page.
All right, so if everybody's okay to keep rolling, so that I don't know if we have a quorum of members for
We
business.
do have Justin, James, and Matt Turk is on the line, so we do have a quorum to proceed.
Great.
Welcome to the March 24th, 2022 Business Committee of the Lehigh Northampton Airport Authority. Is there any public comment?
We do not have any, sir.
I hope everybody got a chance to approve the minutes, or review the minutes, I should say, and I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion carried. Under the action items, we gotta look at a fan motor repair. I don't know if Steve wants to talk about that.
Sure, thank you, Justin. So the more, I guess, the board meeting March 1st, everyone noticed HC Lines was sitting at the curb, and I said I'd bring it back this month. Well, this is this month. So what we've discovered is the one of the two 50 horsepower motors in our air handling unit 1, which is basically moves the circulated air here in the terminal building, is in need of repair. It has some wheel bearing noise. Really, it needs to come out and be rebuilt and reinstalled. And so HC Lines has provided this quote under PA CoStars to perform the work. Part of the motor rebuild will be to send it out new bearings, but also rewind the motor. So they're going to tear this thing down, and it'll give us many, many years of additional service. We did look into replacing the motor, which has a 24-month or 24-week lead time. It's a specialty motor. It's not really something we can go over to an electrical motor supply house and pick up. So this is the best course of action. It is actually located within the air handling unit, so we have to disassemble a majority of the ductwork to actually remove this thing. It's about 1,000 pounds. So it's quite a big project, and we do this, the other motor in 2017. So this is kind of a maintenance and repair item that we periodically run across. So I would look for the approval of the HC Lines quote not to exceed $30,000 at this point. We can open up for any questions.
I have no questions. I'll make the motion to not to exceed 30,000.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carried.
Thank you.
We can move on to the discussion items. We'll have first we'll have a capital projects update. That'll be Ryan.
Sure, yeah. Thanks, Justin. Good morning, everybody. Let's run through a few updates here. Nothing too major from last month. Let's go work. I don't know if this is working, so can you, is that working?
It's not.
All right.
That's what I was wrong. I think it probably needs a new battery.
So you keep going.
Uh-oh.
So really where we are with our couple phases of the runway project, we really just got out of winter shutdown this past Monday. So working again with the nightly closures, 11 to 5:30. And I'll get to, if you want to go to the next one, so that kind of the overall what we're doing in 2022. Again, package 2 is kicked up again, working on this runway center line lighting. Go to the next slide. Package 3, they started some of the, still some of the grading that they need to do, but really package 3, most of that work is going to happen really in the summer to do the final markings across the entire length of the runway once all the paving is complete. Package 4, what they're actually looking to do starting up is some of the under drain under the shoulder, which we talked about before, and then getting back to finish taxiway Echo North reconstruction. The one thing with this, and we'll have a slide on it probably next month or the month after, but package 5, which is the runway shoulder construction along the entire length of the runway, is currently out to bid. We're looking to get bids in next week. And really the timing of that is due to the grant applications that are due April 11th to get that in to capture the funding for that project. So this is really everything that's going to be going on this year. Again, the different colors are the different packages, but basically Taxiway Echo North, finishing that, which had started last year. The Taxiway Gulf relocation down there, number 2, they're going to start here earlier in the spring, early summer. And then you can see the under drain, which they're doing on the shoulder, and then with package 5, the actual paving of the shoulder that we're waiting on the bids on right now. And depending on how much funding is available from the FAA, some of that work over near at the end of 2-4 with Alpha, Alpha 1, Alpha 2, some of that work will be done as well if we have the funding for those alternates. Next slide, Savette. So then I'm just rolling to Queen City. This one again, another AIP project for rehabbing Runway 1533. Bids are out on the street right now, looking to get bids in April 6th. Again, same time frame, April 11th, is when the grant applications are due. This one is a multi-year construction, so this first package or phase is really going to be paving of the runway. And then next year, and again, all FAA funding dependent, will be the lighting on the section of Taxiway Bravo on the south there, and then along the entire length of the runway as well. And then moving on to Braden, some good updates here with the terminal building. Really March 9th, they completed the sewer line installation. March 12th, the modular unit buildings were actually anchored into place. They've actually, now that the building is set, they've started working on some of the interior to get that squared away, the fence and the electrical that's required for the structure as well. So I think I mentioned this last month, but just kind of as an overall, so even though we have the contract with Vanguard for the site work in the building, there's a lot of items that we have other contractors helping with, as well as the LNAA for coordinating, getting into the space and occupying it. So basically in terms of the site work, landscaping, we're looking to finish that next month in April. And then really in May, we need to basically relocate the furniture that's in the existing terminal into the new space. So there'll be some coordination, additional updates there on timing and phasing of that. And then same thing with the parking lot is, obviously there's still businesses operating there, so we'll have to phase that with repairs, a seal coating, and then the final markings as part of that. The big piece with that too is they're putting in a access road and gate, which we put on there, for access. And then really in July, kind of the finishing touches with that front portico, rear awning, and some of the final components of that. So more to come on the specifics, but just so the committee is aware, there's multiple kind of stages to get us, fully open and operational. But otherwise, that's going pretty well. And then you can see here the summary that we go through. Again, I'm still working through our, looking good with our contingencies on the projects. Again, you can see the percentage completed there with where we are. But like I said, next few months we'll be adding package 5 to this based on the AIP grants that we're going to get, and then depending on how the bids come in. I believe that's it. If anyone has any questions.
All right, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Good to look out the window here and see steel.
Oh, yeah.
We'll move on to the air service update. It's going to be Darren. And Darren, if you want to pass it off, I'm not sure if that's here.
Brad is here, so I'm going to hand it right off to Brad. He's
Brad,
you guys have all met Brad, I think, on Zoom over the last couple of years, but we actually have him here in the flesh today. So,
Good morning.
so the clicker's not working, so.
Okay. I'm told to stay on the red dot, so here I am. Good morning, everyone. Excited to be here again. I feel like I'm in a whole brand new airport being down here. So I'm going to quickly I'm going to beat you down a little bit and build you back up, give you a sense of what's going on in this industry. I was noting in the previous presentation regarding the relative strength of the airport versus peers, but maybe not against the national scene. That's primarily driven by the fact that most of the recovery is leisure driven. And so a lot of the airports that are really doing well are in Florida, Arizona, places like that. And the reason you're doing well regionally is because of Allegiant. And Allegiant's taking folks there. And most of those other airports don't have the amount of low-cost service that you have. So that's really what we're going to be talking about here. Okay. So this is the rate of the recovery so far through March. This is those TSA numbers as a percentage of April 2020. So you can see, versus 2019, I should have said. So you can see now at March, we're at about 87% fully recovered in terms of TSA throughput. So we're getting there. A lot of airports are over 100%. Most of those are in the fun and sun type of destinations. The places that aren't are the places that are the least funny and sunny, I guess. So we all know about COVID. I don't need to go into all of that. The next big issue that the industry is having is fuel prices. You know, with the beginning of the war in Ukraine, we've seen those prices shoot up. Not only does that impact the profitability of air carrier service, it really hits the smaller planes, the regional jets, really hard. Bigger the airplane, generally the more efficient it is in terms of a per seat cost. Smaller airplanes tend to be more expensive as, you know, it gets incrementally more expensive as fuel goes up. So it hurts the 50-seat RJs in particular, which are already in trouble. Now the cool thing is right now, the cool thing for the airlines, maybe not so much for the customer, is that there's so much demand in the market for domestic travel that they're able to pass along a lot of these cost increase to the customer. So if you've been shopping for fares recently, you may have noticed fares are really, really high in general. That's not going to change anytime soon. And part of the reason it's not going to change is because not only do we have all those issues, we have a pilot shortage, and the pilot shortage is getting worse. It's going to continue to get worse. It particularly affects the regional carriers. We've known this is coming for a long time. It's systemic. It's not something that we're going to be able to impact with any significant positive momentum anytime soon. These numbers, you know, just they're probably not that. This is just a forecast, but you can see the deficits that we have. It's getting worse and worse because of retirements, because of growth. So the industry is growing at the same time. The pilot pool is shrinking, and fixing that issue is something that's going to take a coordinated effort across the industry and government, and that has sort of never really happened yet. I don't think the depths of the issue have really, the government in particular has not really understood what's happening, and now it's starting. United and SkyWest announced that they're pulling out of 30 or so essential air service markets, which are markets that are where the government actually subsidizes the carrier to fly, because those are a lot of small airports where politicians are very sensitive to, you know, those communities completely losing service. We're starting to see a lot of, you know, chest thumping and such in Congress. Now you can't close these airports, you can't close down the service. So maybe we'll see some action, but in the meantime, we really got a situation where I don't know how we're going to get out of this. Certainly not going to be by more flights. And this is what we're seeing here. This is the regional jet block hours. And the thing to note here is that these are all regional jets. The green are small 50-seat regional jets. The light blue are the bigger 76 regional jets, and then the total is the dark blue. And that current realistic period in the blue column, that's what's in the schedule today that we sort of feel comfortable that that's what's going to fly. Anything beyond that, so beyond May, we don't really know if the airlines are going to be able to fly those schedules yet. So we wouldn't consider those reliable. Normally you would, by the way. Normally, schedules 6 months out you consider reliable. But since the pandemic began, nothing's reliable anymore. What you see here in the dotted line, that is what they planned to fly as of 2 weeks ago, the level. And then in the last 2 weeks, that's what they've cut out of the schedule. So in a very short window, in this case, just a couple of months out, they've had to cancel a lot of service because they don't have enough pilots or crews to fly the airplanes.
Is that a pilot and crew issue, or is that a concern in regard to the economic climate?
It's a pilot and crew issue.
Okay.
Yeah, the economic climate is great for aviation. I mean, the revenue side is
Yeah.
fantastic. Demand is really, really high right now.
Yeah, one of the concerns we've got, I'm a banker, one of the concerns we've got is with what's going on regarding inflation, that people are going to start reallocating spending patterns, and
Yeah.
what impact that's going to have in the leisure market.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think the general consensus is people didn't spend money on travel
Yep.
for a couple of years. They spent money on things. Now they have all their things. They still have money.
Yeah, they actually didn't spend money, they spent money on things, but they also saved a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly.
There was a lot of cash.
Yeah.
The question is whether they're going to spend it or not.
And so far, it's interesting because all the airlines JP Morgan had the industries, all the carriers did their conference last week, and they were all basically saying the same thing. The demand environment is incredible. They will be able to pass along cost increases to the consumer for the foreseeable future. And this has been true in the last couple of cost spike periods as well, when fuel prices went up. They've been able to absorb those costs. In fact, the last time it happened, the airlines were at record profits. They more than made up for it.
Yep.
And right now, it just seems like that's the demand environment we have, at least going through this year.
Okay.
So one of the issues that's exacerbating this pilot shortage is that the growth of the ultra low cost carriers, the Allegiants of the world, they're taking a lot of these pilots that otherwise would have been flying these regional aircraft, which is making it more and more difficult for the regionals to staff their. In fact, I think that at some point there's maybe 30% of the regional fleet right now is grounded because they don't have crews. I'm going to show you how this goes. This is from the airline trade group, but you can see the mix here. So the green are large, 150 seat plus mainline aircraft. That's a percentage of U.S. departures. Back in 2005, there were only 11%. So you can think about what it was like here. You had a lot of 50-seat regional jets, little to no mainline, if I recall, except for when Allegiant came in with the limited amount of flying they had. But if you think about where you are today, you still have a lot of regional jets. Most of them are a little bit bigger than the 76-seaters, so they're in the blue category. But you have more mainline departures now than you used to. Almost all Allegiant right now, but Delta, periodically is in with mainline as well. You're going to see that trend continue. You're going to see more and more of the departures by large airplanes. On the flip side, you're going to see fewer departures probably. You kind of already have seen fewer departures. I'm not sure that we're going to see a lot fewer departures here because you're kind of already at a life support level almost of departure numbers. It's basically the number of departures that make sense for the airlines. If they go below that, it's not going to, it's not positive, and I don't think I think you're only probably going to go up on departures from this point forward. I think we've hit the bottom. So if we look at the market share of the different types of carriers, you're going to see what's happening in the industry. It's the same thing that's happening here locally. 20 years ago, the major network carriers in Southwest controlled the vast majority of the market. So that'd be the blue and the yellow combined. What we've seen up here is if you look particularly at the green are the ULCCs like Allegiant, Spirit, Frontier. And the red are hybrid carriers like Alaska Airlines and JetBlue. You can see that low-cost carriers are becoming a bigger and bigger part of the market. And that's important because that is what's driving growth. Because the prices are low enough, they stimulate demand, they create new markets. So how does that affect KBE? Well, it's going to look different. You can see already that this is only through the third quarter of 2021 because it's government data, and that's as far as we have. You can see the recovery has begun, but you'll note that the fare level is a lot lower. Now, this isn't being driven by network carrier passengers. The business travelers disappeared in this time frame. So this is primarily low-cost carriers. This is primarily Allegiant passengers mixed in with the network carrier passengers that you had in that period, which weren't a lot. We'll see those numbers come up a little bit as network carriers recover, but also as airlines raise fares. but it's definitely a different revenue type of environment than historically you had. You can see here how steady it was for a long time, how high the fares were. We started to see the bump with Allegiant. Then we hit the pandemic, and now we're starting to see the bump again. It's going to continue to rise. And that's because Allegiant's offsetting the reductions we've seen in the other carriers. In the last year or so, Nashville and Sarasota have been added. There'll be more growth from them in the future, I'm sure. But you can see what's happened with the other carriers. American pulled out of the Philadelphia market, replaced it with Chicago. Chicago's not a great hub for American. They don't do very well at Chicago. So it's great to have it, but it's not, it's not American's best market. And Charlotte now, because the pandemic is down to 2, really that's probably more driven by cruise at this point than the pandemic. Delta has temporarily removed the main line from Atlanta. And Detroit's also down to 2. That's also crew-related regional jet issues. United really is struggling with, United has the highest percentage of regional jets in their fleet. They are very, very dependent on regional jets. And so this situation's hitting them really hard. It's particularly hitting them hard at Washington Dulles. They've suspended, I think, 22 domestic regional markets year over year, starting in July, and you are one of them. So that service, which we just got new right as the pandemic began, we were super thrilled about that, is going to be suspended until they're able to come up with some solution on the cruise. And Chicago is down to 1 also. One thing about Chicago to keep in mind, this is true of Detroit, is you don't have a lot of east-west business demand out of here right now. Generally speaking, there isn't a lot, but right now there hasn't been a lot of business demand, period. And so the east-west flying is particularly hurt. It's not just an ABE issue. This applies to a lot of markets. Those hubs in particular have struggled in the recovery because most of the leisure demand is north-south. But I would say your seats in March are actually up versus the pre-pandemic number. So it's like we're starting to get a full recovery of the seats because most of that growth is going to be driven by Allegiant. We're going to see traffic recovery, so I imagine you'll be positive on traffic versus pre-pandemic numbers here very soon. I want to give you a sense of where we are without Allegiant. You have basically 4 routes. Atlanta and Charlotte to the south. Those are your most successful routes. Those are the best ones. Those are the ones the most profitable. Those are the solid core routes. The east-west markets, like I said, struggle a little bit because of their business markets. You do have 2 carriers in Chicago. It's a very, very basic route network. And frankly, there's not a whole lot of opportunity for growth to other hubs in the near term because most of the markets that we would want, like the next hub that we would consider would be like Dallas-Fort Worth, which would be great, but that's still going to be on a regional jet. And because there was no regional growth, we're just kind of in a holding pattern on network carrier service for a while. On the other hand,
Real quick on that slide, we've got the bus to Newark. We've got the bus to Newark. How many other airports are seeing buses?
So, it's a good question. It's the worst. But some people love it. Yeah.
Believe it or not.
So for a long time, you were the only one.
Yeah, it's proximity.
It was the only bus route. But it's really interesting because there's a new concept that's it's a company called Landline, which is founded by a bunch of airline people who started a bus company, and their first routes were out of Minneapolis, St. Paul, working with Sun Country Airlines. And they basically created a product that is far superior in terms of service and comfort. And it's a code share, so similar to what United does here, but with an elevated level of service. And they have been pretty successful. And that model started to expand. United's doing it in Denver, and we're starting to see it expand to the East Coast. So I suspect that we're going to see a lot more of that sort of thing. What it does, in a lot of cases, the hub's so close that, the time on the road is actually it's quicker than flying to those places. If you had to fly to Newark from here, it's probably less efficient than actually taking the bus. The question is, what these carriers are trying to do is get their TSA, the operating plan that they have with the TSA, they need to make some amendments to be able to use the bus behind security. So basically, you check in, say here, you go through TSA here, get on the bus, there'll be a sterile bus, and you go directly to a gate at Newark, something like that. We're gonna see more of that happen. It's gonna be a more seamless product eventually. I do think we're gonna see that. That's a general, the industry, I think, accepts the fact that in some of these close-in hub and spoke markets, that's gonna become a more common, we're gonna see more of that.
Where did they bus from Denver?
I think, Fort Collins, yeah.
One other, I forget.
Yeah. I think it's a 2-hour, in the Minnesota operation, I think they found like the 2.5 to 2 hour range is sort of a sweet spot for them. But it's a really nice product. It's a more comfortable plane for sure. That's your route map with Allegiant. And we've seen, since the base open in particular, we've seen some really nice growth into some new markets that you never would have had before. Savannah Hilton Head, that's a client of mine. That's someone that we're really excited about. It got off to a little bit of a slow start because of the pandemic. It tends to get off to a slow start because it's not Florida, but eventually it builds up. Once people start going, they love it. It should become a permanent part of your air service portfolio at this point. Those are types of destinations you never would have had from here before. So I said I was going to beat you down a little bit with the network carrier part. This is the part where I talk about the future. This is the part where we talk about what the possibilities are here. We're seeing the beginning of it. You'll notice it's mostly Florida here, right? But Savannah's not Florida. Myrtle Beach is basically Florida in the summer. Nashville's certainly not Florida, right? They are all leisure destinations, though. These are markets that are, people are going to go for the weekend, generally speaking. Savannah and Nashville in particular. So what I want to talk to you guys about today, and this is probably the most important thing, is the vision for air service at ABE in the future. Y'all have been in a long-term sort of funk with air service here. It's not anything to do necessarily with the market. It has a lot to do with just industry dynamics. But that's going to change. We're already seeing it change. The slide I just showed you is part of that change. This map is from the Regional Plan Association for New York City. It was a study that came out in 2018 talking about regional airport capacity for New York into the future. And the key thing to understand here is where the airports are in the region and what their capacity is to handle growth. All the airports in the red boxes are basically capacity limited at this point. Some of them, there's no additional capacity for aircraft movements. They can take bigger airplanes maybe, but they're not going to be able to take more flights. We already know that's true in LaGuardia and JFK. They're slot-controlled airports. By the way, in this particular study, they predict that Teterboro Airport, it will have to close due to climate change. It's sort of at a really low elevation already, and the cost of maintaining it as sea levels rise is going to be prohibitive. So that's an interesting concept. So what you really have are a handful of airports that will be able to absorb demand that is created within the region. And I just want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that people are going to drive from New York City to Allentown to take a flight. But all the people that live between here and New York are going to have a choice. This is true of Philadelphia. They have a choice. They can go to Philadelphia, let's say, and catch a flight there to wherever they're going, or they can drive here to do it. As time goes on in a capacity-controlled airport, it's going to get more and more and more expensive to fly out of those airports. And it's also not going to, those airports are not going to be able to handle the additional growth, population growth, economic growth, whatever is driving air travel demand. If you have a facility that's basically at its limit, as time goes on and growth continues, it's going to have to go somewhere else. My prediction is that it's going to go to some of these airports in the periphery. And you are well positioned because you are at the periphery of two major metropolitan areas, plus you have your own. And you have one to the north. You have everything to the west, and to the south a little bit. You're in a pretty good geographic position to absorb a lot of this. Legion already sees it. They're already starting along this path. It's a long-term thing. This isn't going to happen all next year. But over time, we're going to see this gradual movement of people coming out here as long as there is service for them to use. So Legion's already doing this. They're doing a really good job. I would say probably you are well positioned. Trenton's really well positioned as well. They've got airport issues they got to figure out. They're a pretty low-cost airport today, but they also have pretty, poor facilities. So,
Zero facilities?
yeah. In order for them to take advantage of this, they're going to have to make capital investments that are going to be pretty expensive, and that's going to eat away at some of their cost advantages. So there is a lot of possibility for growth in the future. One of those, I'm going to bring this up just because it's been in the news. The merger of Frontier and Spirit is going to create the largest ULCC in the country. It's going to be about half the size of United. But if you note, they have 283 airplanes in their fleets now. They're going to have 493 by the end of 2026. That's a lot of growth. That growth is not going to happen in Newark. It's not going to happen, much of it's not going to happen in Philly. They're trying to grow right now in Philly, but they're very limited in what they can do. Now, they're already in Trenton. Frontier is already in Trenton, so they'll probably try to grow there. But there's nothing to preclude them from flying to Trenton and Allentown. They may do that. But it doesn't even really matter because there's a whole bunch of other ULCCs now on the market. If you're not familiar, on the left side, there's two brand new ones that started flying last year, Avello and Breeze. Their route networks are a little bit different, but there's one thing in common. They're primarily focused on leisure markets. You'll notice at the top of Avello, their East Coast base is Tweed New Haven Airport. They figured out how to operate in there after Tweed has done some airfield improvements. So they're already invested in the sort of Northeast Corridor region. I would expect them in the future to look for other opportunities. Breeze is the same way. Breeze has Airbus A220 aircraft. They're just getting, that's going to enable them to do long haul. These are very, very efficient small airplanes that make long haul economics really good for thinner routes, for routes that don't have as much traffic. And you start to see all these red routes on there. Those are all they just announced, and you notice that they're all, because they just got the airplane, you'll see that they're all these transcon routes. Those are both opportunities. Sun Country is a Minneapolis-based low-cost carrier that is growing also. So it's not just Allegiant, it's not just Frontier, not just Spirit. There's really 5 or 6, depending on whether this merger happens or not, that could fly out of here. Now, why would they? Why would they come in if Allegiant's here, right? Well, if you think about it, Allegiant flies to Orlando, Sanford, St. Pete Airport, Punta Gorda on the West Coast. Those are not the primary airports in the region. Those are not the big demand airports in the region. Orlando International Airport is the big demand airport. Tampa International Airport is the big demand. Fort Myers Airport, Southwest Florida Airport, that is the big demand. And you don't have service to any of those. So could one of these carriers come in and basically fly to those big demand airports, or places like Las Vegas, some of the other destinations that we're seeing these airlines expand into, and sort of coexist with Allegiant? Yeah, they could. They absolutely could. It's starting to happen in other markets. So that's what we're going to be aiming for when we talk to these carriers, is to recruit those carriers in those markets. Now, here's our challenge. As you guys know, with the finances at the airport over the year has not led to this being the lowest cost airport in the country. And for the airlines, the challenge is that when your average base fare is $54, the cost of operating the airport becomes really, really, really critical. I will say that the $54 is the average national fare that Allegiant got in the third quarter, or the year ending 3Q 2021. It does not include taxes or anything like that. It also does not include the ancillary fees. So any seat, when they charge you for your seat or your bag, that's not included in there. So I don't want to mislead you to think that they only get $54. They're getting probably 100 some dollars. But these are airports, we're really familiar with. These are our clients that are all Allegiant bases. So we have a really good understanding of what the cost per enplanement for each of those airports is. And you can see that AB is a high-cost airport. For Allegiant, it's probably one of the highest cost bases. Now that sounds terrible, sounds bad. It's also a good revenue market for them. So sort of, that's why they made the base here. They already knew what the costs were when they opened the base. They've been here for a long time, they do really well here. But my point on this is that future growth is going to be dependent on making that number lower, because other airlines aren't going to be interested in coming in at that number to compete with Allegiant. And Allegiant, it limits what Allegiant is going to be willing to do. Now, the important thing here to understand is that the incremental expansion that we see from them helps with that. It's not just cost cuts that happen. If we can get more service, we can get more traffic generated. And sometimes, you know, we just get lucky on that. They strike a market, it does well, they'll expand. So it doesn't, I'm not saying you have to like just start slicing and dicing the budget, but we all need to be focused on trying to move both dials. Because we can affect that number pretty quick if we get enough additional traffic. But it is a little bit of a circular type of a story there. And that is, that's basically a summary. I guess what I would say here is that, you know, I look out here and I see this and I see future, I see growth. You know, when I came here like 10, 12 years ago when I first started working with the airport, I didn't see that. I didn't see a community that was as vibrant and growing and young, diverse as this community is now. I saw airports around that had plenty of capacity, at least for the time. And I saw an industry that didn't have as much ultra low cost carrier growth. Now we see this growth. All these things are coalescing together for a future I think can be a lot brighter for this airport than I've ever thought it would be. And I think that if we can focus on making it attractive to new carriers, if we get one more carrier to sort of balance out Allegiant and get to those other big airports, you're going to see that number drop dramatically on the CPE side, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling sort of a thing, because they can't grow at Newark, can't grow at Philly, and you know, Atlantic City doesn't have the demographics that we do. There's a bright future ahead of us, and I think that you all should be focused on thinking about how you leverage what you do here to make that happen. That's it. Questions?
No. Thanks for the detailed report, Brad. I will say that I have the record, I think, for the fastest meeting, and you ruined that today.
I'm sorry, we told that this time, but.
And we cut half his slides before he came in, so.
Yeah.
So you tried for me?
I tried to do my
You know,
best for you.
I came all the way up from Atlanta just to do that.
Well, then I take my comments back. Is there any new business?
No new business.
All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn. All right, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Let's wait, before we start exec, let's wait a couple of minutes and see if Matt jumps back on so we have a quorum.
Perfect, yep. As a reminder, if people need restrooms, out the door to the right past the
No, it's tough to get them to. It's tough to get them to, right?
Colin, you'll let me know when we're live.
So,
Okay, we're live. Thank you, Colin, I appreciate it. And we'll go ahead and call the March 24th, 2022 Executive Committee meeting to order. We do not have an a quorum at this point. We're short one person. So what we're going to do is we're going to reorder the agenda. We're going to start with the discussion items, go through those. Hopefully we'll have one of our remaining exec committee members join so that we have a quorum, and we'll double back at that point to the action items. So that's the game plan for exec this morning. So the first discussion item is nominating committee update. Our nominating committee chair is Larry Hamburger. I know Larry's not on the call today, and I believe, Mike, you've been working with Larry. Mike Stershik, you've been working with Larry, so you have the update for us this morning.
Yep, we do have a slate of officers for the, to be nominated at the next board meeting and elected in April. The nominees will be Chair John Hayes, Vice Chair Glenn Reedman, Secretary Treasurer Justin Grimshaw, Northampton County Representative Tara Zrinsky, and Lehigh County Representative myself.
Okay,
And,
sounds good. Thank you, Mike. Go ahead, Mike, I'm sorry.
That's where we are. That's it.
Okay. If anyone else has any interest, make sure you get a hold of Mike quickly so that we can handle that. And our game plan is to have that election in April, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It'll be presented at the meeting next week.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Any questions for Mike? Okay, hearing none. Next on the discussion list is the operations and safety update. Steve, you're on.
John? So I thought what I do, last time I kind of gave an update, I talked about the entire department, what we do. I figured I'd focus in on snow. Todd does such a great job at talking about how much it costs the authority to move snow around here. So I just thought I'd do a brief presentation on the effort it takes. Primarily focusing on the maintenance and operations group, because they're, we're the folks that are kind of here moving the snow. So real quick, not a lot of slides, just some images from the snow this year. The Allegiant photo there, you can see there's not a lot of accumulation, right? That was that freezing rain event that really went on for quite a few hours, and just some light snowfalls. This was in January 7th, so that was just a couple inches of really powdery snow. But you can see how it's blowing around on the airfield. So the maintenance department loves to joke about plowing the snowflake multiple times. So we move it, it blows, we move it again, and it's just a continuous effort. Next slide, Scott. So for the airfield, we're looking primarily at our aircraft operating areas. It's about 150 acres of airside pavement. Our standard for the runway is no worse than wet. We're obligated to begin snow removal on the runway before it reaches a ½ inch of dry snow. It's really what our snow and ice control plan talks about. But we cannot have more than a ½ inch of wet snow or 2 inches of dry snow accumulated on the runway, or we have to close it. So unlike PennDOT, who waits till it accumulates in your neighborhood and then the next morning they come by and plow everything out, really from the time the snow starts, our entire maintenance department and contractors on the land side are here at the beginning and for the entire event. Next slide, please. This is an image of kind of our land side operation. It's about 48 acres of pavement and sidewalks. And once again, our land side group, focusing on the terminal area, the air traffic control tower, all of the hangar parking lots and sidewalks. Not on this image, but there's actually some sidewalks we work on in the city of up in Catasauqua that border our property up in Catasauqua. But we're continuously clearing these areas also. So once again, it's a non-stop movement of snow once it begins. Just some highlights from this year. Once again, these are the photos actually from this year. We had kind of recorded 12 impactful events, 19.5 inches total season to date for this winter season. Some significant events, really not a lot of accumulation. Remember last year we got the huge snowfall in February or January, 58 inches last season. But really, if everyone can remember that a lot of these events this year were 24-hour events. Like we got 4 inches of snow over 24 hours. Or we got freezing rain over like a 12-hour period. So it's not so much the amount, it's the length of time that it takes it to fall. Because if it's going to snow for 24 hours, we're basically moving snow for 24 hours. Some statistics for our maintenance department. About 1,473 labor hours this year during snow removal operations. So this includes our landside and airside departments. So about 18 maintenance individuals put in 1,473 hours. Compared to last year, that's about half. So we did almost 3,000 hours last year. This year we sprayed 12,400 gallons of liquid runway anti-icing chemical. That's that truck 11 with the 75-foot booms that we go out and spray to kind of melt ice and keep the runways and taxiways safe. 10 tons of dry chem, so that's our sodium formate that we spray. We spread that out with a sand mixture. On our roadways, 139 tons, roadways and parking lots, 139 tons of road salt. And then this was amazing to me, is we actually did 45 tons of sidewalk melt. So this is a specific product. It's not road salt. It's a chemical you put on the concrete to prevent it doesn't negatively impact the concrete, which road salt does. So that's, that just indicates the amount of freezing weather we had. We were spreading this stuff every time we had some melt or any, in advance of any storms. So we did about half the hours, but we did about 60% of the chemical we did in last year. So it wasn't really a half. Just because we only did 19 and a half inches of snow, we really did a significant amount of chemical because of the type of precipitation. And once again, this is, just some images. This is, if you go back, so that this is actually on the runway. And we had those high winds after that light snow. That's kind of the way it blows, and we chase this stuff. We plow it off the runway, and it blows right across. This was the March storm where we had that kind of wet snow. It just was a miserable, it gets miserable to move that stuff and then blow it off the aircraft operating areas. And then our airport operations officers are on site when we're continuously moving snow. So that crew is our safety inspectors. They go out and they inspect the airfield and kind of grade it as to whether it's safe for aircraft operations. Issued 484 field condition NOTAMs. So this is putting that data in and pushing out to the airport users. They also did 170 local field condition reports. So this is a system we use internally that tells our local folks what the airfield conditions are about. Typically, NOTAMs as they change, as field conditions change, and then the local field condition reports about once an hour during a snowstorm. And this year we had no dual runway closures due to weather here at ADE, so the airport remained open the entire time. A couple of those freezing rain events, we got a little nervous. If my guys aren't nervous when they're out on the runway, I don't want them out there. So if you're not feeling good about it, we empower our operations officers and our snow command staff to make the right decision. They don't need to call me. They don't need to call Tom. I don't need to get permission to close the runways. If they're not making the safe standard, they're closing until we can get that fixed up. Last year we did probably 12 hours when we had that major snowstorm. We really had the runway clear, but we had 36 inches of snow everywhere else, so we had to close. We basically closed for about 12 hours till we could get the taxiways and aprons cleared up. And then our management staff, whether it's maintenance or ops, are here also for the entire event, leading the effort. So just a quick update. I don't know if anybody has any questions.
Are we done for the year?
I remember a March snowstorm where we got about 12 inches the last week of March. So I'm not gonna put the fork in it. I got the worst sunburn ever during a snowstorm during that, because the sun angle was so high, and I just was sitting in the truck for 12 hours and got sunburned. So, yeah, I'm not gonna put it to bed yet.
Is there like pre-treatments that go with that, or does that anti-icing work right away?
So, yeah, that's a great question. For the parking lots where we can throw a bunch of rock salt down, there's not a lot of jet engines to blow it off. Airfield wise, we do put the liquid chemical down if they're calling for freezing rain in advance, but we don't necessarily put any chemical down if it's raining and then going to freezing, because by the time the surfaces freeze, we will have spent, the $10 a gallon or whatever that stuff costs. So, yeah, it's a great question.
Obviously, the chemicals are safe. Is there any concern in regard to how much? Does that create an issue if we have to put more chemicals down?
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of our stormwater permitting, they're actually testing today, right?
I think so, yeah.
So part of our stormwater permits, we actually, RITU comes out and tests our stormwater basins for this chemicals. All of it is biodegradable, and like the type 1 anti-icing or de-icing fluid we use on aircraft is propylene glycol, which is in and of itself, it's in medications and all that stuff. So it gets out into our retention basins and biodegrades before we send it off to the streams.
Other questions for Steve? Okay, Steve, thank you. Thanks for that report. That was interesting. It's always interesting to see what happens with.
It's a big effort, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I couldn't get any. Connie had great pictures of her friendly, smiling staff. I have absolutely no pictures of any of us happy when it's snowing. So I apologize for that. Unless we're rubbing each other's faces in the snowbank.
Okay, next on the discussion items is the development update. Darren.
I think we want to do that in executive session, so.
Okay. Sounds good. Do we have any other discussion items?
No
Okay.
other discussion items and no new business that I'm aware of.
Okay. And we do have a need for exec session. We're not going to be making any
No
decisions.
decisions as part of that, just an
Sounds good.
informational update.
Do we have the judge on?
I believe he was there. Yep.
Okay. Hi, Judge, you're on mute.
I'm on, yes. All right, we're going into executive session for information, I understand. Is that right?
That's correct, Judge.
All right, that's appropriate. There'll be no voting, there'll be merely provision of information.
Okay, thank you. I'd entertain a motion to move to exec session.
So moved.
Second? I'll second. I think I'm the only other one on the call. Two separate things. In terms of the approval of the meeting minutes, we will defer those to the exec committee meeting to be held in April. And the approval of the Florio Perucci invoices, we will put on the board agenda, so that's Tuesday next week, so that we can take care of that at that meeting.
Perfect.
So with that, I think we asked prior, we don't have any new business. Anyone have anything they need to bring forth? Hearing nothing, Mike, can you move that the meeting is adjourned?
Sure, will do. So
Okay,
moved.
thanks, that takes care of it.
All right.
Okay, that takes care of exec. Do we have an ad hoc meeting today?
We do,
Okay.
and we do have a quorum for that, I think.
Okay, sounds good. If everybody's okay, we'll roll right into the ad hoc meeting. Okay, Sylvia, can you call the roll quickly on this one so we know who's on the committee?
Sure. Matt Turk, John Hayes.
Here.
Paul Anthony, which I believe he's on.
Here.
Robert Brooks, and Don Gottschall.
Here.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Do we have any public comment?
We do not, sir.
Okay, sounds good. Action item is approval of the meeting minutes from February 24th. They were circulated and they were out on Nova's agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make the motion.
Have a motion, sounds like a second in there as well. Any additions, deletions, or corrections? Hearing none, all those in favor of the subject motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Terminal connector and security checkpoint project update. Ryan.
So me, thank you. Good morning, everybody. All right, so what everyone's probably waiting for, good update here. Hopefully, some of the photos of where we are and kind of go through really a lot of progress that's happened this last month. So 35% complete. Really, a lot of the structural foundation has been completed. You kind of see ongoing work items, obviously looking out the window. I'll show you some photos as well. Structural steel installation, they're actually finishing up sequence 6 of 9. Over the last 3 weeks, they got the 6 sequences done. The last 3 will start up mid-April in the vertical circulation core, which they're working on some of the foundation walls right now, which will kind of go into that in a minute. Installation of the steel roof decking, basically right above us right now. The footer wall, elevator, escalator pit, continuing the steel concrete testing and inspections that are required, the waterproofing. Again, working through the restroom renovations as well. And again, just working through the intermittent closures, probably starting up next month again for the bathroom on the first floor. So really some of the major elements that are upcoming are continuing the concrete masonry unit block construction, vertical circulation core foundation, which you can see the forms getting set up right here, and then continuing the steel roof decking as well. So this is in the vertical circulation core pit, if you want to call it. You can see basically the foundation walls getting set up there. So that's it. Again, some of the escalator pits where the sump pumps are going in, and again, just some of the foundations you can just see kind of progressing.
These escalators, when they break down 30 years from now, we'll be able to get at them to repair them as opposed to the ones we have?
Yes, and we have stairs, yes.
Okay.
Well, and redundancy, don't forget. So unlike today where we have 1 elevator, we'll have 2 elevators.
And they'll be bigger.
Right.
So again, you can see some of the foundations, see all the rebar that's put in there as well. Pretty extensive foundations. Again, that's the some of the wall that they're setting up. One of the cranes was using to put the forms in, and actually yesterday they were pouring some of the concrete between those 2 forms that'll create the foundation wall of that vertical circulation core. Again, that's a tunnel opening that they went through, I believe it was last month. Again, just getting that all kind of cleaned up for when they're going to connect the 2 spaces. Again, just another shot. They actually put down that kind of temporary flooring. You can see where that lift is on because it was basically a mud pit beforehand when they were doing all of the micropiles. So again, just cleaning up that to make it more accessible. And then this little video, Colin helped me pull together, just some little updates. You can see, again, as most of you probably saw with the news articles, this is the first steel beam that they were putting in earlier in the month. Again, it's been continual, nice looking out the window and seeing a lot of these beams going in throughout the construction. Again, just getting some of the welding, in place and support pieces. That's the 90-foot truss they put in. I believe it was last week. That kind of spans across that curved portion of the connector. So again, the other crane is used for those form walls you can kind of see, and then there's a concrete pump truck that pumps the concrete into that form to create the wall there. So you kind of see again just going through. There it is. This is a time lapse from the beginning when we started last fall. But what's interesting is we've been talking a lot about all the utility work and the micropiles and the foundations. When you get to the end, you can see now that we're actually seeing it, it's such a small blip at this point in the time that it took to even get to this point. But again, it's nice to see really the structure going vertical. As you can see it just moved just like that. So just like that, it's done.
That's the best part.
So, and then this is where it really was yesterday. Again, getting that set up. So sequence 6 really, again, that's really your frame of the checkpoint itself. As I mentioned, the next 3 sequences that we'll see next month is in the vertical circulation core on that side as well. Again, just some more shots of the steel. We can keep going through these quick. Again, another shot. You see the roof decking that they're putting in just to the right out here. See where it actually goes in there, right through the glass. Yeah, you go this one. So again, really where we are, continuing with some of the foundation work we talked about in the vertical circulation core, continuing that construction for kind of our phase 1 of the project. And really where we are kind of overall, which we've shown before, you can see the foundation work where we are, the site work, 35% overall, and then the building shell, the steel, again, started this month, about 15% with that as well. Again, phase two, one of the future phases, once you actually get into the checkpoint. And then, go to the next slide. And then phase three is once the checkpoint is commissioned, it's doing the work in the tunnel. So we're kind of coordinating some of those schedules and timeframes right now of how we're going to do those next phases. So really updated this slide a little bit, but same general information. You can see the schedule on the right. Again, still holding true. Again, working with the contractor on the schedule. Some more discussions to follow now that we're kind of progressing through the steel. And then just kind of we've talked about it before, but just showing kind of our grants of where we are. We actually have 2 pending applications. In December, you may recall, we submitted $3.2 million for PennDOT for the capital budget program. And then actually submitting, applications are due Monday as part of the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law funding. There's an airport terminal grant program that we're going to submit on our connector project as well. So hopefully we can get a connect on that $5 million from the federal side. And again, you can see the numbers where we are, still tracking well with all of our percentages and progress.
What do you think the odds are on the 2 grants that are pending?
I mean, I know, Colin does a great job advocating and talking to the state and even the federal side, but the 3.2, I don't know, Colin, if you want to mention anything. But.
I think there's a couple things. First is that, that's the Bureau of Aviation, and if you remember back to when we were talking about the Bureau of Aviation and the impact of the pandemic on its budget, I know they're working with legislators to get some of that money that was part of the American Rescue Plan and some other funding pumped back into the Bureau of Aviation. But we have a great relationship with the director, Anthony McCluskey. I showed you, he's been on the site, he knows the project. We've met with PennDOT, we met with Deputy Secretary Morse. We had discussions, she knows the importance of the project. What they like about what we're doing here is it's a strategic approach to all the projects that we're doing. This is not some throw something at the wall, let's see if it lands, or if it's a beautification project. This is about operationally making this airport more viable. So there's certainly great support at the state level. It's not a large pot of money. Typically it's about that $10 million range for all airports across the Commonwealth. We've been very fortunate in the past through the Hangar 11. I think we got $6 to $8 million, somewhere in that range. I know we got last year about $1.8 million from the Bureau. So we're hoping, and we'll have Director McCluskey out here again to make decisions now that going over the application. The bill portion of it, and we've had some great discussions with, we had Senator Casey here not too long ago. We've had Congresswoman Wild, who's spoken to her, and Senator Toomey. Generally, again, this project checks, and if you remember when I did the governmental update, it was the bill funding. We talked about the airport terminal program and all the different boxes, what they were looking for, ADA compliance, help with capacity, really, hitting all of those areas. Well, this project pretty much checks all the boxes as we're submitting the application. The interesting part, and I think maybe hopefully knock on wood, at least in our favor, is that we're not competing in the sections of the Phillies and the Pittsburghs. There's breakdown into hub airports, small hub, medium hub, so you're going against other airports of your size and caliber for a certain pot of money. I think it's about $200 million. But again, that's not a lot over an entire country. But again, I think when you look at our project, and Ryan and I have participated in calls about the bill funding, and especially about the ATP program, is that our project, for all intents and purposes, hits every single thing. And the other part of it, and I think we've stressed this to Senator Casey and Congresswoman Wild, is this is infrastructure and bill money that you've just passed. And when you pass it along to this project, you will be celebrating it early next year or into that. It's not a situation where the project is being designed. It's not a situation where the project will get started. You've passed this bill, the infrastructure money will be brought in and shoved out, and that will be part of the successes of the bill and the infrastructure project. So I think, look, we're submitting the application on Monday or earlier than that. We have letters of support that we'll have from all of our federal side. they, Ryan and Tom talking to the FAA, so we'll make our case. But I think it fits in a lot of different areas, so we'll just keep pushing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the only thing, and thanks, Colin, the only thing to add to that is, kind of like you mentioned before, of us continuing this project, during the pandemic, that portion. At a conference last week in Hershey, they kind of did the yearly aviation conference, for local, and a lot of sponsors or other airports are trying to find projects to fit this bill funding. And we, to Colin's point, we have one right now that checks all the boxes. We have other needs in our capital program that have been identified, and we continue to progress. So it's just another piece that we're really in a great position that we can hopefully, continue to move forward. So just to throw that out there as well. Okay. Yeah, so we'll obviously keep the committee updated with where we are, but I believe that's the update. So if anyone has any questions.
Any questions for Ryan? Okay. Ryan, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have any new business to bring before the ad hoc committee? Hearing none? Mike, or I'm sorry, not Mike. Somebody make a motion to adjourn. I forget who was on it.
All or not.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, everybody. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. I will see everybody then next week at 12 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yep, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
And John, right, this next finance meeting at 9:15, because we're going to do an update